Watching a live security monitor's frame rate violently drop to zero right as a dark silhouette reaches up to cut the wire is terrifying. But it's nothing compared to realizing the camera that just died is the one mounted directly inside the unlit hallway above your own head. My name is Leo, and during the freezing winter of 2024, I took a temporary job as an overnight security guard for a massive, semi-abandoned commercial logistics center on the industrial edge of Toledo, Ohio. The property was immense, comprising 3 interconnected warehouses, a desolate gravel truck yard, and a labyrinth of narrow, concrete-walled corridors that hadn't been painted since the late 1980s. My workstation was a tiny, windowless security booth located deep within the central basement hub, equipped with a creaking metal chair, a flickering space heater, and a massive wall matrix of 12 old CRT monitors. The screens displayed static-heavy, low-resolution feeds from across the property, refreshing at a sluggish 4 frames per second. My shift was completely isolated, spanning from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., a brutal stretch of time where the silence of the building was so loud it made my ears ring. It was exactly 2:42 a.m. when the first anomaly occurred. I was drinking stale coffee, staring blankly at the monitors, when camera 4, which overlooked the exterior rear loading docks, suddenly went completely black. There was no static, no warning. The feed simply dissolved into a dark, hollow rectangle. I assumed it was a blown fuse due to the sub-zero temperatures outside, so I reached for my logbook to make a note of the technical failure. But as my pen touched the paper, camera 5, which monitored the heavy iron double doors leading from the loading dock into the main warehouse corridor, cut out as well. A cold prickle of sweat broke out across my neck. The pattern was instantly clear. Someone wasn't just breaking into the facility. They knew exactly where the security blind spots were, and they were systematically disabling the facility's eyes, moving from the outside perimeter inward. My heart began to beat against my ribs like a trapped bird. I reached for the old analog desk phone to dial the local precinct, but the moment I lifted the receiver to my ear, I heard nothing but the dull, hollow hum of a cut line. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my veins. I looked back up at the wall of monitors, and my breath caught violently in my throat. Camera 6, located at the far northern end of the interior concrete hallway on the first floor, went dead. 30 seconds later, camera 7, positioned 50 feet closer down the same hallway, flickered twice and died. Whoever was moving down the primary corridor with absolute precision, walking at a calm, unhurried pace while cutting the camera feeds one by one. The path they were taking led directly to the central concrete staircase, the only access point down into my basement security hub. I knew that staying inside the windowless booth was suicide. The heavy metal door had a simple latch lock that wouldn't hold against any serious force, and the room was a literal dead end. Grabbing my heavy iron maglite flashlight and the heavy set of master keys, I quietly slipped out of the security booth and stepped into the pitch-black basement hallway. The only illumination came from the faint green glow of a distant exit sign, casting long, distorted shadows down the narrow passage. The air down there was freezing, and the smell of old rust and wet concrete was suffocating. I stood perfectly still against the wall, holding my breath, listening to the dark. For a long minute, there was nothing but the steady, metallic dripping of a pipe somewhere in the shadows. Then, from the top of the concrete staircase at the end of the hall, I heard it. The slow, heavy click of boots descending the steps, accompanied by the distinct, rhythmic scraping sound of a heavy metal tool dragging against the iron handrail. Clink, clink, clink. Every survival instinct in my body screamed at me to run, but I couldn't risk making a sound on the smooth concrete floor. Moving like a ghost, I slid backward down the hallway, guiding myself by keeping my palm pressed against the cold drywall, heading toward the rear emergency exit door that led out to the gravel truck yard. But as I reached the end of the hall, a sudden, blinding flash of light erupted from the top of the stairs. A high-powered tactical flashlight beam sliced through the darkness, cutting down the long corridor and reflecting off the walls. I dove into a shallow utility alcove just in time, pressing my back against an old electrical transformer box, my chest heaving as I tried to remain perfectly silent. Through the gap in the metal shelving, I watched the beam of light scan the hallway, illuminating the thick dust motes floating in the air. The footsteps stopped directly outside my security booth. I heard the door handle jiggle violently, followed by the sound of a heavy shoulder slamming against the wood paneling until the lock gave way with a loud, splintering crash. The intruder was inside my workspace. A heavy, aggressive silence fell over the basement again, lasting for 2 agonizing minutes. I knew they were searching the empty booth, realizing that I had fled. Suddenly, the tactical light beam swung out of the booth and pointed straight down the hallway toward my utility alcove. The footsteps broke into a terrifying, unhurried stride, the dragging metal tool clanging loudly against the concrete floor. I didn't wait a second longer. I burst out of the alcove, threw my entire weight against the iron emergency exit door, and stumbled out into the freezing night air. I sprinted across the dark, gravel truck yard, my bare lungs burning in the winter wind, not stopping until I climbed over the chain-link perimeter fence and ran down the middle of an unlit country road toward a distant 24-hour gas station. The state police arrived at the logistics center 20 minutes later with a K-9 unit. They found the security booth completely ransacked, but what they discovered on the central desk made the officers turn pale. The intruder hadn't just cut the camera wires. They had used a black grease marker to draw a large, crude skull directly onto the glass screens of the dead monitors, with an arrow pointing toward the emergency exit where I had escaped. The suspect was never apprehended, and the facility was permanently closed a month later. I never took another night shift job again, and to this day, whenever I walk through a modern building and see a security camera mounted in the corner, I find myself staring at the tiny glass lens, wondering if the person watching the feed is looking at a safe hallway, or if they're watching the screen slowly go black. There is a distinct, paralyzing cold that takes over your body when you watch a live security camera feed of an empty parking garage level at 3 a.m. and see a parked, unlit SUV violently rock on its suspension, followed by a thick, dark liquid beginning to pool out from underneath the rear bumper. My name is David, and in the summer of 2025, I worked the graveyard shift as the sole surveillance operator for a massive, 5-story underground parking structure located beneath a high-profile corporate plaza in downtown Denver, Colorado. The garage was a textbook example of an unsettling liminal space, a cavernous, subterranean concrete bunker filled with thick structural pillars, yellow, painted lines, and a low, oppressive ceiling that trapped the heavy, toxic smell of car exhaust and stagnant oil. My workspace was a small observation office located on level P1, surrounded by a wall of high-definition digital monitors displaying live video from 40 different cameras scattered across the dark subterranean levels. Because it was a corporate garage, the facility was completely vacant between midnight and 5 a.m., leaving me entirely alone in a concrete world of dead vehicles and empty driving lanes. It was exactly 3:12 a.m. when a bright yellow notification light began to flash on my main console, indicating a motion sensor alert on level P4, the deepest, least used level of the structure. I shifted my attention to the corresponding monitor, expecting to see a stray cat or a flickering light fixture setting off the sensor. Instead, the camera showed a large, dark gray SUV parked in a dark corner stall, far away from the elevator banks. The vehicle was completely unlit, but as I watched the screen, the entire rear chassis of the car gave a violent, heavy lurch to the left. A second later, the car rocked again, the suspension groaning visibly on the high-definition feed as if something immense and heavy was thrashing around inside the vehicle's enclosed trunk. My hands froze over the keyboard. I zoomed in on the license plate, but the rear of the car was covered in thick, intentional layers of dark mud, obscuring every single digit. As I watched the screen, the driver's side door of the SUV slowly clicked open. A tall figure stepped out onto the stained concrete floor. The person was dressed in a heavy, oversized industrial jumpsuit, their entire face obscured by a dark, reflective welding mask that caught the sickly yellow glare of the overhead sodium lights. They walked to the rear of the SUV, popped the trunk lid, and reached inside, lifting out a heavy, long object wrapped tightly in a thick canvas tarp. They dragged the object across the concrete, leaving a thick, dark smear behind it that looked black on the security monitor. My stomach did a violent flip. This wasn't a simple case of trespassing. I was looking at a live crime scene playing out 4 floors beneath my feet. I immediately reached for my cell phone to dial 911, but the moment I hit the call button, the signal dropped to 0. The thick concrete reinforcements of the subterranean garage were notorious for blocking cellular data, and the landline phone on my desk gave nothing but a rapid, broken air tone. The intruder with a welding mask suddenly stopped what they were doing on the monitor. They turned their heads slowly, looking directly into the camera lens mounted on the concrete pillar above them. It was as if they knew exactly where the surveillance station was. They reached into their jumpsuit pocket, pulled out a handheld industrial laser pointer, and aimed the bright red beam directly into the camera lens. The monitor in my office instantly turned into a useless swirl of distorted purple pixels and digital static. Camera 32 was dead. A wave of pure terror washed over me when the monitor next to it, camera 31, which covered the central driving ramp of level P4, showed the welding mask figure walking calmly toward the concrete ramp, heading up toward level P3. They were systematically moving up the levels of the garage, coming straight toward the surface where my observation office was located. I knew that if I tried to run up the main driving ramps, I would be completely exposed in the open lanes, easily visible to a predator hunting in the dark. My only option was the emergency concrete fire stairs located at the western edge of the structure. I grabbed my heavy flashlight, crept out of the office, and slipped into the vast, silent darkness of level P1. The garage was deathly quiet, the only sound being the low, mechanical drone of the main ventilation fans echoing through the concrete caverns. I walked along the shadow of the structural pillars, my eyes scanning the dark driving lanes. Suddenly, an echoing, screeching sound cut through the silence from the level below me. It was the sound of a heavy metal tire iron being dragged along the corrugated metal security gates of the elevator shafts. Clack, clack, clack. The sound was closer now, echoing up the concrete ramps with terrifying clarity. The intruder was already on level P2. I broke into a silent, panicked jog, my sneakers making a soft, scraping sound on the concrete. I reached the heavy iron fire door, pushed it open, and slipped into the narrow, vertical concrete stairwell. The air inside the stairs was cold and smelled of stale mold. I began to climb the steps as fast as I could, heading toward the street-level exit. But as I reached the landing between level P1 and the surface, the heavy iron door at the very bottom of the stairwell, for levels below, slammed open with a deafening metallic boom that echoed up the vertical shaft like a gunshot. A second later, the frantic, heavy sound of boots began to sprint up the concrete steps behind me, moving with a terrifying, unnatural speed that sounded like an animal chasing its prey in a cave. I didn't look back. I threw my entire weight against the final street-level exit door, bursting out into the cool night air of the empty downtown plaza. I ran down the sidewalk, screaming for help, until I found a passing municipal street sweeper truck and begged the driver to call the police. When 3 Denver police cruisers arrived at the garage 10 minutes later, the dark gray SUV was gone, having sped out through the automated exit lane by violently smashing through the plastic security barrier. However, when the detectives reviewed the main server backups of the security footage from level P4, they found something that made the entire department launch a massive federal investigation. Inside the dark corner stall where the SUV had been parked, the intruder had left a heavy, industrial plastic barrel sealed with duct tape. Inside was a collection of stolen driver's licenses and personal jewelry belonging to 5 different people who had gone missing from various downtown parking structures over the last year. The suspect was never identified, and the garage was fitted with armed guards the following week. I quit the job that very night. I can never park my car in an underground garage anymore, and whenever I have to walk through a multi-level concrete deck, I find myself looking at the dark spaces between the pillars, listening for the distant, echoing sound of heavy boots dragging metal against the walls. Staring at a digital matrix of 16 identical security camera feeds of an automated self-storage facility at 2 a.m. is tedious, until every single motion sensor light in corridor B clicks on in a rapid, terrifying sequence, signaling that someone is sprinting down the hallway directly toward your unlit monitoring station. My name is Chris, and in the spring of 2023, I was employed as the night shift dispatcher for a sprawling, fully automated 24-hour self-storage complex located on a desolate industrial highway outside of Austin, Texas. The facility was massive, consisting of 4 long, single-story metal buildings split into hundreds of individual storage units secured by heavy rolling corrugated iron shutters. The entire property was completely unstaffed at night. Customers used an electronic keypad at the main gate to enter, and the interior hallways were controlled by automated motion-activated LED lighting that remained completely dark unless someone was walking through the aisles. My job was to sit in the small, glass-fronted manager's office at the front gate, monitoring the 16-channel CCTV system and ensuring no one was sleeping in their units. It was exactly 2:15 a.m. when a flash of bright white light caught my eye on monitor 8, which overlooked corridor B in building 3. The motion sensors had been triggered, lighting up the long, narrow hallway of identical silver metal doors. I expected to see a customer hauling boxes, but the screen remained completely empty. I watched closely as the light at the far end of the corridor timed out and went dark, only for the next light in the sequence to instantly click on, followed by the next one and the next one. Something was moving down the long hallway at an incredible, rapid pace, but the camera feed showed absolutely nothing on the floor. It was as if an invisible ghost was tripping the sensors one by one, sprinting toward the exit door of Building 3. My skin turned to goosebumps. I adjusted the contrast on the digital monitor, zooming in on the final hallway gate, when the heavy rolling shutter of Unit 214, located right under the camera lens, suddenly began to rattle violently from the inside. The metal shutter was kicked outward with immense force, bending the bottom iron track out of its groove. A hand reached out from the dark gap beneath the broken door, a gaunt, skeletal hand clutching a heavy pair of industrial bolt cutters. A figure slowly slid out from the dark interior of the storage unit, dragging themselves onto the concrete floor of the corridor. The person was wearing a filthy, tattered denim jacket, their head completely covered in a dirty, yellowed burlap sack with 2 crude, mismatched eye holes cut into the fabric. They stood up, clutching the bolt cutters, and looked directly into camera 8. My breath hitched in my throat. This person hadn't broken into the facility from the outside. They had been living inside Unit 214, waiting in the dark for the dead of night. Before I could process the danger, the burlap-masked figure raised the bolt cutters and smashed the camera housing, sending my monitor 8 into a screen of gray digital static. A second later, monitor 9, which covered the exterior gravel path between Building 3 and the front office, lit up. The figure was running across the open yard, heading straight toward the manager's office where I was sitting. I frantically reached for the main console to activate the electronic lockdown system, a feature that was supposed to drop heavy iron shutters over the office windows and lock the main glass entrance door. But when I slammed my palm against the emergency button, nothing happened. The digital screen displayed a fatal system error. Keypad override activated at main gate. The intruder had used a stolen master code at the exterior keypad, completely freezing the office's security system from the outside. I looked through the wide glass windows of the office, and my heart dropped into my stomach. In the pale glow of the highway street lamps, I could see the burlap-masked figure sprinting across the gravel yard, the heavy iron bolt cutters glinting in the dark. They were 50 feet away from the office, and the main glass door was completely unlocked. I knew I had less than 10 seconds before they burst through the front entrance. Leaving the monitoring desk, I dove behind a heavy stack of packaged cardboard moving boxes stacked in the corner of the room, pressing my body into the narrow gap between the cardboard and the drywall, pulling an empty shipping crate over my legs to hide myself in the shadows. A second later, the front glass door was violently kicked open with a loud, shattering crash as the lock mechanism exploded into fragments. The heavy footsteps of the intruder stepped onto the linoleum floor of the office. The sound of their breathing was loud and ragged, a wet, rattling gasp that came clearly through the burlap fabric. I could hear the metal bolt cutters scraping against the edge of my desk as they searched the room. Scritch, scratch, scritch. They smashed the computer monitors, sending plastic and glass raining down onto the floor, clearly furious that the office appeared empty. I squeezed my eyes shut, my entire body shaking so violently I was terrified the cardboard boxes would rattle and give away my position. The heavy footsteps moved closer to my corner, stopping just 3 feet away from where I was crouching in the dark. The smell that wafted off the intruder was sickening, a foul mix of old copper, rotten food, and damp earth. I heard them kick an empty trash can out of the way, the metal tool striking the floor with a heavy thud. For a long, agonizing minute, the silence in the office was absolute except for that wet, raspy breathing. Then, my cell phone, which I had stupidly left face up on the desk console, began to vibrate aggressively as a routine automated security alert came through. The bright blue screen lit up the dark office. The intruder instantly lunged toward the desk, grabbing the phone and smashing it onto the floor with a feral, muffled scream. Believing that I had already fled the building through a back window, the figure turned and ran out of the office, their heavy steps disappearing back across the gravel yard toward the dark storage structures. I waited in that cramped, suffocating hiding spot for 30 minutes, not moving a single muscle, until the bright red and blue lights of 3 state police cruisers illuminated the shattered glass of the front office window. The police searched the entire storage complex and discovered that Unit 214 had been turned into a literal stalking den. The walls were covered in handwritten notes detailing my shift hours, my car's license plate number, and photos taken of me from the exterior woods while I was working on previous nights. The suspect had escaped into the deep brush of the Texas wilderness behind the property and was never found. I resigned from the security company the very next morning, and I moved to a different state entirely. I still don't know if I did the right thing. What would you have done if you were me? Tell me in the comments. To this day, whenever I see a row of storage units or an automated light click on in an empty hallway, a wave of pure, cold paranoia hits my chest, because I know that behind those silver metal doors, someone could be sitting in the dark, waiting for the lights to go out.